to be a willing participant in the challenges of life and to just be involved in the ubiquitous obstacles that are going to be ever present in our reality here as a human being living on this earth. We are going to go through a lot of different kinds of trials and tribulations in which some may be considerably horrifying or daunting to us, but that must not let ourselves be consumed by the darkness. Well, so the shocking thing that really allowed me to change my life was understanding that I could implement maliciousness and the evil that I perceived in the world into myself and transmute that energy into something good. Well, so how exactly do you do that? And what exactly does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean that you become evil, okay? It doesn't mean that you become malicious. It doesn't mean that you become capricious or crude or cruel. It means that you learn how to harness that for setting boundaries or upholding standards within yourself and the people around you. And this is going to be something that you're always going to have to deal with, especially as a man trying to make it in the world right now. The world is more competitive than ever before, and there's a lot of different challenges that we may not see outright going before us, but that doesn't mean that the challenges are not going to be hidden in the shadows necessarily. In fact, a lot of the challenges that I face nowadays, I didn't even know there could be challenges like this 5 years ago in life. And it's not just about, everybody wants to put food on the table or have a roof over their heads or etc. Water, clean water, energy, etc. But there are other kinds of challenges that you're going to face in life that you're going to need that kind of darkness within you to be implemented into your being so that you can stand your ground when you're needing to. Because if you don't, then that darkness is going to overtake you. That darkness is going to completely consume you to the point, or you're going to put it like what I did. I put anger and I put frustration and all these negative traits that I associated with masculinity. I put all of these traits into a box that I said on the, in the back of my mind, do not open, with the box covered in red. Like that was at least the way that I thought about these kinds of character traits. And it was only when I was able to completely submerge myself into the juxtaposed feelings that I had towards these things that I was able to really move beyond this. And it was the matter of something that changed my life as well was something that Carl Jung had said, who is a psychologist and a analytical psychologist specifically that studied under Freud but broke away from Freud, and in the early 1910s, 1913 to be specific. And he broke away from Freud because they had disagreements about where the psyche's true nature lied. And Freud believed that it was all about the sex urge that humans had, and that everything came back to sex. But Carl Jung didn't think so. He thought something a little bit more. He didn't think that human beings were so benign and so plain and animalistic. If we are truly made in the image of God, then that would mean that there's something deeper. And so his reasonably considerate, as far as I'm concerned, proclamation was that there are certain kinds of personalities within you that are struggling for dominance and struggling for power inside of you. And those kinds of personalities some are hereditary in some sense as far as your epigenetics go, like the kinds of, for anybody that doesn't know what epigenetics are basically how you were raised environmentally and how your parents were raised environmentally, etc., down your line. And it's very likely that the kind of environment that your parents were raised in is going to be very similar to the environment that you're raised in. Well, what happens when you wake up, and this is actually scientifically proven, that the more you raise your consciousness, the more that you activate neurons in the brain, so to speak, and you create new neural pathways, and you create more gray matter in your brain. Well, what happens is, because your mind is operating more on all cylinders and it's really just waking itself up, well, there's going to be certain proteins in your DNA that are going to be activated, and that can change the entire course of your epigenetics going further. Well, so what Carl Jung thought was that there are archetypes in your mind that are, again, these are personalities. It's good to think about these as personalities that are not exactly like your choice. They're given unto you via culture and via your genetics and biology and via the species of humanity at large. So a few of these you can think about are the four main archetypes that not Carl Jung came up with, but another set of psychologists came up with, was, which I think are, as far as personalities go, this is the most reasonable, is the king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover. There's also a book on this. And you can think about the maturation of these personalities going forward inside your psyche and what happens to the maturation of these going on in your psyche. Well, so how does this work exactly, and how does this pertain to what I'm talking about at the very beginning of this video? Well, it's that let's take the dark side of these archetypes. You can think about like the Joker, for example, as a dark side of these archetypes. A very keen example. We'll use the Joker for this. Obviously, the Joker is humorous, but in a very dark way. He's also very smart, but in a dark way. He's also very chaotic, but in a dark way. And so sometimes these personalities will trick you. And literally, in this case, the Joker will trick you. Now, I want to talk more about this in the future. I don't think I'll get quite into this in the video here. But I genuinely think that some of these kinds of personalities, you can think about the dark side of these personalities as demons, and then you can think about the lighter side of these personalities as angels. And the reason for that is because, well, obviously, if you're not listening to your demons and you're not listening to your angels, well then, how do you really expect to know what's what inside of you? And again, you don't have to necessarily believe in angels and demons. You can think about these as archetypes as well, practically speaking. But I, as a follower of Christ, I understand that there's not really a difference. I mean, maybe practically and semantically for some believers and non-believers out there is, but in reality, I don't need to believe anymore. Like, of course, I'm going to always have faith and lean on God's understanding and not mine, but I don't need to believe in God or good and evil anymore. I don't need to believe that I am God, because at one point I did think that I am God, and that's completely wrong. And the reason that that's completely wrong is because it's if I were like, there's a difference between being like a God and being God. God is in us, but we are not God. Okay? we're getting really deep into this topic. Perhaps I ought to have made a disclaimer at the beginning of this. This is going to be a deep video, so anybody that's still here, comment the word deep in the comment section, because we're getting pretty dang deep here in this video. But I think this is going to be necessary for a lot of people, and I think more people can handle this kind of stuff than we'd like to think. A lot of people want the superficial, like, here's the answer, there's that. But those are not the kinds of people that are going to be viable on this channel. This channel is not going to be for everybody, but it is going to absolutely be for everybody that does not necessarily desire the flesh and does not discern through the flesh, but discerns through the Spirit and our Father in heaven. If you discern through the Spirit and the Father in heaven, this is the channel for you, because you know that there's no BS on this channel. You know that sometimes I might say some things to kind of shake the boat a little bit, but it's all out of love. It's not necessarily out of malice or anything like that, but this is part of the incorporation and the implementation of the darkness into your being. Here's the difference between the dark and the light. Darkness really, well, obviously there's a lot of difference between the dark and the light, but what you can gain from the darkness and learning about the darkness is power and strength. But you only get the power and the strength without the chaos of, like, the Joker per se, if you can learn how to discipline it with compassion and love through the light. So if you can discipline your darkness with compassion and love, and this isn't the kind of love where it's like, oh, we love. It's not romantic love. No. It's a choice of love. That's what I'm talking about. It's a love of choice. Well, it's not a love of choice, but you guys see what I'm saying. It's a form of love through choice. And you have to give yourself a choice. You have to give yourself an option. And it's not always about giving yourself an option, but it's also about giving yourself the compassion to see that you have options. That you're not just stuck. And I know what that's like. I know what this is like. I have many people in my consultations that I've talked to recently that have felt this way. And I've had many people in my life that I've seen. I remember my grandfather and his family, his immediate family, my extended family members. They told me at one point never to chase after my dreams because I'll always be disappointed. They literally told me this. Like, we were sitting outside after dinner. It was in the heat of the desert, because that's where they lived, in the desert. And even though it was, nighttime, it was still like 89 degrees or 90 degrees or whatever it was. And so I remember the night very well. And we would go down there during the summers. And I remember hearing that. And I remember thinking to myself, why would I want to take that advice? Why would I want to take advice from people that never chased after their dreams? Why would I want to do that? And I really didn't have an answer. I really didn't at the time. And I was genuinely asking myself this question because I wanted to know. And this is where things get really complex with God. Because if you ask, it's fine to ask questions. It's good to ask questions. It's fine to intellectually challenge anybody or anything. But to reject the answer because you don't like the answer, well, that's on you, buddy. That's on you. And I know that that's something that I struggled with for a long time. I didn't want to believe these answers. I didn't want to have to make certain decisions based off of the answers that I was getting from my questions to God. And so now I have a completely different outlook, even though it changed my life though. Being able to incorporate and implement the darkness and transmute it into something better changed my life. And it shocked me. It shook me to my core that I could do this, because I didn't know that I could do this. Because as I said, for so long I placed these dark masculine traits in my eyes. I placed them in a box, and I didn't want to see what was out or what was inside the box, because, well, what would happen if they got out? You know, what would happen if these if these things got out? I don't know if I'd be able to handle the as a vessel, you know, what kind of darkness is in there. But that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. So you just got to learn how to not let the darkness take control of you, but accept it. And Carl Jung said to accept the darkness. This is the quote that he said was, accept darkness without being an enemy to it. He who can accept his darkness without being an enemy to it will become wise, or something along those lines. But that's the point. That's the idea here, is to not be an enemy to the darkness, but know that it is your enemy. So don't be an enemy, but know it is the enemy. And because, well, where do you think the devil is, if not inside? If God is also inside of you, if God is inside of you, you don't think the devil's capable of being inside of you? Really? You know, people so many times want to think that everything's outside of themselves, and yet they want to be glorified. It doesn't make sense. You know, it just doesn't make logical sense. Because there's a lot of pride and arrogance and vanity in people. And as the Devil's Advocate says, it's a movie, The Devil's Advocate, with Keanu Reeves and Al Pacino. The devil in that movie says, my favorite sin is vanity. Well, think about that for a minute. Well, why exactly is vanity the devil's favorite sin? Well, because he can hide in vanity. He hides it very well in vanity. He hides the darkness in vanity. A person can be so vain that they're not even realizing they're being vain. And that's true vanity right there. That's true vanity, which is most people. Like, most people are like that. And it is what it is. You know, there's a difference, though, between being vain and being confident, because people like us who are in deep into this world and this realm and domain of life, we understand life at a deeper level. We want to understand life at a deeper level. We almost have to hide our uniqueness sometimes to these people that are the normies, because the normies just, they get uncomfortable, a little too uncomfortable. They'll start to fear you. And if they get too much of a fear, I would say, if people are your enemies per se, like you see an enemy in plain sight, it's okay if they fear you a little bit. Obviously, the goal would be great to have an enemy, because then you have a potential friend, right? There's a sage that once said something like that. An enemy is a blessed person to have in your life. Why? Because it's a potential friend. And so there's something healthy there a little bit, if you actually have an enemy, to have a little bit of fear. No, but ultimately the goal would be to befriend this enemy down the line. Why do you think Jesus told us to pray for our enemies and to love our enemies? He didn't mean like, he meant that because once you realize, like when you're saved by Jesus, you realize that there's not really anybody better or worse off than you. And sometimes it may feel like that's not the case. Sometimes it may feel like the cards that you've been dealt are way worse, or they're not nearly as bad, and you know that. And be grateful for either of those situations, though, because God wouldn't give you that if you couldn't handle it. And that doesn't, I mean that everybody knows that sounds cliche, but that's where the faith part comes into play. But this is also why I say I don't need to believe anymore, is because I know it will be okay. I know that every time God has given me a test, when I'm being broken down, when I am being vulnerable, when I feel desperate, that's when God really makes me ask myself, like, who are you really trying to be here? Is this the kind of person that you want to be? So it's something to think about. With all that being said, I do hope this video was insightful and useful for you guys. Wow, we went through a lot in this video. But if you do want to join the Regal Change Academy, where we have a lot of different kinds of conversations like this, we have the free Discord channel community with a godly group of people. There's an ebook in there, meditation guides, fitness guides, healing guides, etc. Then in the paid community, we are now having a Maps of the Psyche class coming up. This will be a weekly class that people can attend as part of the full membership there. It's not going to be a super in-depth as far as like the tasks to do or the reading or whatever, but there will be conversations like what we just had today in that class. We originally had 2 Bible study classes, but we're now replacing one of the Bible study classes with that class weekly. We do have a weekly Bible study class as well as a weekly Regal Assembly where we talk about a variety of different topics and subjects. As far as the class series go, so we have classes and then we have class series. The class series are going to be way more in depth, are going to be much more communicative, and very much more tailored to certain kinds of topics. So we're going to have a class series for the Stoics, Legends of Stoicism class series coming up in a couple weeks. We're also going to be doing more kinds of like monthly meditations, etc. We also have classes that you can do on your own time. So for the Godlike Savage workshop or meditation workshop, entrepreneurship, etc. There's something in there for everybody at this point, and everybody can be really getting a lot from those. This is not an end-all be-all. I'm not a guru or anything like that. I don't claim to be those things. I'm a teacher, but I also know that I'm a student. And these are just going to be building blocks for you. Okay, this is a building block, and you can take those as you need them. But that's the point. It's to be a building block. It's not the end-all be-all. Okay, so I do appreciate everybody moving from the YouTube platform over to X, Rumble, and Instagram recently. I do appreciate your guys' extra support. And with all that being said, peace be with you all. Till next time.